As we get ready for Kalos once again in Pokemon Legends CA, I decided to see if Pokemon X and Y is as easy as people really say. And what better way to do that than with a hardcore Nuzlocke. In a hardcore Nuzlocke, on top of traditional Nuzlocke rules, I also have to adhere to strict level caps. And to see how easy this game really is, I decide my level cap is actually 2 levels below the gym leader's ace. After being smacked awake by my mother's fletchling, I put on my clothes and head on over to the next town to meet up with my neighbors. They seem to quarrel over what they want to call me as a nickname, and I honestly don't care. I'm just here to get my starter. I decide to go with Froakie this time, and my reason is, Ribbit. Shauna wants to face us in a battle, and after blowing bubbles at her Pokemon to knock it out, I realize this journey might just be the easiest one yet. Before you know it, we're already getting our first capture, and in Pokemon X and Y's case, it's always going to be a Pidgey at Route 2 that's level 3. X and Y really went hard with the love letter to Gen 1, huh? In the Walmart brand version of Viridian Forest, I encounter a Weedle. And this Weedle has a purpose. You'll see. By the way, at the end of Santaloon Forest, you don't have to go forward with your friends. The game makes you think that, but you can just let them walk off. While headed over to Santaloon City for the first gym, I encounter a Bunnelby. Aw, look at that theme. As I prepare for the first gym, Weedle evolves into a Kakuna. I encounter a Litleo on Route 22 east of Santaloon City, and then finally Kakuna then evolves into a Beedrill. With our fellow minions up to the level cap of level 10, we are ready to take on the first gym leader, Viola. She's a bug type specialist. While one might think Litleo is perfect for this gym, the actual perfect encounter I have is my Beedrill. Viola starts off with her Surskit, who knows the move Bubble, Water Sport, Quick Attack. This segment of the battle turns out to be this lengthy exchange of Fury attacks and bubbles between Surskit and Beedrill. Ultimately though, Beedrill comes out on top, and at this point Viola has used all her potions. Then comes her ace, her level 12 Vivillon, supporting the move Harden, Tackle, and Infestation. Infestation, while may not do much damage up front, it traps you in the battlefield and does residual damage every turn. While Litleo has a type advantage against this Vivillon, she cannot afford to come in and be trapped by Infestation, so it is up to our brave Beedrill to fulfill his life's purpose and go down swinging so Litleo can come in and take the victory. Thank you, Beedrill. Gone soon, but remembered forever. Our Litleo then comes out and is able to take down the Vivillon with just a couple of embers. And just like that, the very first badge of the Kalos League is ours. Easy peasy. One gym down, 7 more, and an entire Pokemon League to go. After finding out the gap between the first 2 gyms was kinda long in black and white, they decided that this one should be even longer. As I take a single step on the grass of Route 4, I am taken aback as I encounter strongest Pokemon I could have ever imagined. Man, I wish I had this guy for Viola instead of Beedrill. After blindly following a couple of strangers into a large city, we find ourselves in Professor Dilf's lab, where he immediately wants us to battle him. He has the 3 Cantonian starters, all of which are just level 10. We get to pick one of the Kanto starters, and this time I decide to go with Bulbasaur because I usually always pick the other 2. Downstairs we meet a stranger whose hair and clothes blend into one and says something about beautiful and stuff. I bet he won't stress me out later. On the way out of the city we run into him again, and this time he's going on about how this one movie star should stay young forever and that it's her job to stay young forever. And then on Route 5, we run into a supposed gym leader who is not following the local leash laws. Thankfully, her dogs don't jump on me, even though one of them took an unnecessary interest in me. I bet this gym leader also won't stress me out later. My Route 5 encounter is a new mechanic to this generation known as Horde Battles, and I encounter a bunch of Scraggy. After catching Scraggy, my Froakie evolves into Frogadier. Our buddy Tierno challenges us to a battle, and he just has a Soul Corpish, and our newly caught Bulbasaur from Professor Sycamore does an easy job of taking care of it. You see, I don't really try to avoid random trainer battles in hardcore Nuzlocke like many might recommend. This is mostly so that I can make some money and get some EVs. However, sometimes I feel like I should, and I feel like this time I got away pretty lucky, but it was a reminder of things that could go wrong. There's a random trainer on this route who has a level 13 Kadabra. Mind you, Abra can't even evolve till level 16. Anyway, Kadabra has a base 120 attack, and most of my Pokemons are not fully evolved, so that base 120 hits like a truck. On top of that, he spams Telekinesis, an accuracy lowering move. Most of my Pokemon cannot risk a 2-hit to crit, so I have to make a sacrifice in order to take it out. Thankfully, I have a male Combi just sitting there asking to participate, so I have to use my male Combi as a sacrifice as he just continues to miss the bug bite to transition into Litleo, who gets the job done. These random trainers, man. After fighting another random trainer, my Bulbasaur evolves into Ivysaur. Then after another random trainer, my Pidgey evolves into Pidgeotto. I get jumped by a Venipede on Route 6 on the way to Parfume Palace. Before we inquire around about Mega Evolution like Professor Sycamore asked, in the Parfume Palace maze, we help a Furfrou reunite with his obnoxious owner, look at some oddly romantically undertoned fireworks with our friend Shauna, and then proceed to learn not much about Mega Evolution. Our adventures at the Parfume Palace also get us access to the Pokeflute, and using that Pokeflute, our guaranteed encounter on Route 7 is a Snorlax. After revisiting Route 6 for some random trainer battles, my Bunnelby evolves into Diggersby. Yeah, he ain't cute no mo. At the end of Route 7, we team up with Serena to take on the team of Trevor and Tierno. Tierno still only has his Corphish, while Trevor has a Pikachu and a Flabebe. I forget to heal my Pokemon, but it doesn't really matter. I switch out to Ivysaur and just spam Razor Leaf till I win. The incredible slog to the second gym continues as I encounter a Whismur in the connecting cave. Then on a rainy Route 8, I encounter an Inkay, who I accidentally run away from like an idiot. And then to add on to that, I get into a random battle against this trainer's Axew, who I forget has Dragon Rage by the way, but that's not even the issue. I get caught off guard by a Dual Chop that does way more damage than I thought, and next thing you know, my itsy bitsy Venipede has gone down. I had such high hopes for that thing. Even the easiest games can catch you off guard when you're limited by hardcore Nuzlocke, and I'm starting to realize that I better not take this game lightly, as easy as it is, if I want to have a decent team for the endgame. After I ride on this Rhyhorn, I encounter a Sandile in Route 9. It's a modest nature though. We end up in the Glittering Cave as we're chasing another lead to learn more about Mega Evolution. And here in the Glittering Cave, I encounter a Mawile. We have our first encounter with Team Flare, who according to them, their goal is to just make themselves happy and nobody else. That's what this guy is saying. We proceed to fight a bunch of Team Flare grunts on the way to find a scientist who specializes in fossils, because he might know a bit or two about Mega Evolution. Near the end, Serena catches up and helps us take on 2 Team Flare grunts. They send out Scraggy and Toxicroak, and I send out a Scraggy of my own, while Serena sends out her Esper. I get Scraggy out of there as he's really weak to fighting types and switch out to Diggersby. While Diggersby is still weak to fighting types, he is bulky enough to survive a few hits. A double kick does surprisingly low damage to Scraggy, while Esper is deciding to be useful by setting up Light Screen against physical attackers. Diggersby barely survives a non-critical Brick Break, and now I'm in a position where I'm looking at my team, and most of them are weak to fighting types. Actually, all of them except Pidgeotto are weak to fighting types. As I bring out Pidgeotto, Serena finally decides to let her Esper use a Psychic type onto Croagunk, taking it out in one hit. Girl, I don't know why you didn't just do that turn 1. Scraggy deals the finishing blow to Esper, and Serena in her genius brings out another Pokemon that's weak to fighting types, Absol. Thankfully she goes unpunished, as Absol goes for a quick attack and Pidgeotto goes for a gust to take down Scraggy. I switched my team around to avoid level caps, and I just straight up didn't realize how many of my team were weak to fighting types. We catch up to the scientist who is blissfully aware of Team Flare and asks us to choose between the Jaw Fossil and the Sail Fossil. I decide to go with the Jaw Fossil that can be revived to a Tyrant. Tyrant will have the strong jaw ability that makes moves like Bite and Crunch do basically 50% more damage. We immediately head back to the Fossil Research Lab in Ambrit Town and revive the Jaw Fossil into Tyrant. Also, the assistant doesn't tell us anything about Mega Evolution. On the way out of town, this fisherman gives us an old rod. This old rod will come in pretty handy to farm heart scales in the endgame. We finally make it to the home of the second gym, Sillage City. We stop by the bike store to get our own personal bike, then take a quick detour north to Route 10 to get our encounter, which turns out to be Eevee. Unfortunately, this Eevee turns out to be a negative speed nature, but overall it's still a great encounter. At level 20, we miss out on Baby Doll Eyes needed to evolve it into a Sylveon, so this Eevee will have to wait a decent while before it can evolve. My overconfidence seeps through again as I switch into Whismur for some chip damage. It goes for a bite that flinches, and then a swift takes out Whismur early into its journey. Goodness gracious, what am I doing? I know the Whismur line ain't all that great, but why? The more options you have at the endgame, the better it is, and losing Pokemon like this does not help. On the way to the second gym, we run into the gym leader who gives us the HM for strength. We have to defeat him in order to use it outside of battle. To add on to this sloppy run, I accidentally overlevel Frogadier to level 24, surpassing my level cap of 23 for this gym, and Frogadier is gonna have to sit this gym out. Then after the battle, I realize Ivysaur also has overleveled. She's gonna have to sit this one out too. So I make it to Grant with a team of Scraggy, Diggersby, Sandile, Snorlax, Tyrant, and Mawile, all at the level cap of 23, 2 levels below his ace at level 25. Thankfully, this is Kalos, so Grant only carries 2 Pokemon. Grant starts off with his level 25 Amora, the Rock and Ice type. This guy is 4 times weak to fighting, so naturally, I start with Scraggy. Amora decides to use a Thunder Wave on my already slow Pokemon, while Scraggy takes it out with a single Brick Break. Scraggy gets a Moxie boost after knocking out his opponent, and out comes Tyrant, the Rock and Dragon type. Tyrant goes for a Stomp, which flinches. Then Tyrant goes for a second Stomp, and this time it crits, leaving Scraggy in the red. I was hoping after a Moxie boost a Brick Break was enough to take out the Tyrant, but it leaves it with just a Slither, and in the next turn Grant is gonna heal. I switch into Mawile as he resists most of Tyrant's moves, while Grant heals it up. Grant goes for a Stomp that does little damage, while Mawile retaliates with a Fairy Wind. It crits, which is always a great help. Grant goes for a Bite, and of course he gets the flinch. Then he gets a Stomp, which is of course a critical hit, but thankfully Tyrant finally goes down to Fairy Wind, finally netting us the second gym badge. Holy moly, it's been forever. After the gym, I bring back Frogadier and Ivysaur, go take care of leftover trainers on Route 8 and Route 9, and then we run into Team Flare on Route 10, who seem to be interested in what these rocks are cooking. As I sweep through their team with relative ease, I once again begin to worry about the next level cap for the third gym. While the gap is not as big between Gym 1 and Gym 2, it's still a bit away since Gym 3. In Geosenge Town, we see something that is totally not a door or a secret base of any sort. Then we run into the gym leader who is still not following the local leash laws as her dog approaches me. Her Lucario wants to take us on a battle, and she wonders why her dog has taken an interest in us. It's cause I smell funny. Corina has 2 Lucarios. Both of them have the same moveset of Sword Stance, Power Up Punch, Metal Sound, and Feint. One thing to keep in mind is that it loves to go for Metal Sound, which decreases special defense, and she does not know any specially offensive moves. I have a pretty cheesy strategy in mind, which involves Leech Seed, Mawile, and Pidgeotto leveling up to learn Feather Dance in the middle of the battle. I send out my Ivysaur first because she resists all of what Lucario has to offer, and set up a Leech Seed. I bring in Mawile as Lucario goes for a pointless Metal Sound. Lucario then goes for a pretty weak Power-Up Punch, increasing its attack, while I go for a Rock Smash, which luckily lowers his defense. Corina for some reason decides to go for a Feint, doing very little damage, and I decided to take it out with a Rock Smash. Luckily, as Lucario goes down, Pidgeotto levels up and happens to learn Feather Dance. This was pure luck, but it works in my favor. Her second Lucario comes out and goes for a Power-Up Punch, while I decide to stay in and go for a Rock Smash, hoping for a defense drop. I get lucky and indeed get a defense drop. I switch into Pidgeotto as Corina once again decides to go for a Feint, which does little damage despite the critical hit. For the next few turns, I decide to keep Pidgeotto and spam Feather Dance as Lucario goes for what seems like a random set of moves. Then I decide to continue rubbing salt on her wounds and go for Sand Attack. After one last Feather Dance, Pidgeotto retreats and I bring out Mawile. Due to Sand Attack, Lucario continues to miss the next set of his moves, and Mawile takes it out with Rock Smash. What a fun and intelligent way to play the game, I tell you. Afterwards on Route 11, my encounter is a horde of Nidoran. I decided to go with the Nidoran male, just because I like its pointy little ears. It turns out to be a jolly nature, making it a strong candidate for my final team. And after battling a bunch of trainers on Route 11, it evolves to Nidorino. My Reflection Cave encounter is a Roggenrola, which is a great encounter, just not before the fighting type gym. By the way, right here in Glittering Cave you can get Moonstone pretty immediately, which is great for our Nidorino. However, I choose to evolve it at a later time and not right away. We finally make it to Shallower City, home of the off-leash animals, but there's a few things we have to do before we can challenge the gym. I bring my Roggenrola up to a Gigalith all the way up using Trait Evolution, and Tierno catches up to us at the beach. He finds what's an intriguing stone, but in this game it doesn't amount to much else. In Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, however, if you find the intriguing stone, it turns out to be the Mega Evolution Stone for Pidgeot. But in this game, it's just kinda there. The main thing we have to do before the gym is meet up with the Mega Evolution Guru or whatnot to learn about the secrets of Mega Evolution. We get to the Tower of Mastery and proceed to immediately barge into this old man's room where he's chilling with Korrina. This guy is the Mega Evolution Guru, and Korrina is his granddaughter. We meet up with the rest of the gang, and the guru explains that Mega Evolution is just a transformation and not a full-fledged evolution. He wants to give us a Mega Ring, but he only has one, so Serena and I decide to battle for it. Serena has 3 Pokemon, and she starts with her Meowstic. This Meowstic will always go for a Fake Out. I start with my Mawile, who's holding a Rocky Helmet. Thanks to Rocky Helmet, Meowstic's Fake Out does more damage to the Meowstic itself than it does to me. Meowstic sets up a light screen and I decide to hit it with a feint attack, and it looks like a 2-hit knockout. Unfortunately, a second feint attack is just shy of knocking out, so Mawile will have to take another turn. After tanking another Psybeam, Mawile takes out Meowstic using a feint attack. Then comes Absol. Absol goes for a bite as I go for a Fairy Wind, but unfortunately it gets a flinch, and I'm unable to move. Then for some reason I decide to switch into Tyrant. My mentality was, Dark type was one of those types that didn't resist itself, sort of like Fairy. So I thought a Strong Jaw Bite would do more than it did. I decide to bring out my Hydrogen Bomb known as Gigalith, and Absol goes down after Gigalith decides to throw rocks at it. Finally comes out her Quilladin, who at level 30 only knows 2 moves, Bite and Needle Arm. I send out my Snorlax with the intention to Panini press my way to victory. After a couple body slams, we have defeated Serena and we get to keep the Mega Ring. However, before we actually get the Mega Ring, Korrina says we have to prove ourselves by defeating her for the gym badge. God, I'm not looking forward to this gym. You can give the intriguing stone to this hiker over here and he'll give you a sunstone in return. That's it. That's the intriguing stone. What makes the Shallower City gym so difficult is that all 4 trainers are mandatory to get to the gym leader. And the trainers have pretty decent Pokemons like Throw, Machoke, Knockoff Hariyama, Sock, Heracross, so even the random trainers can catch you off guard. Just like this Machoke who has Revenge, which does more damage if it goes second, and next thing you know, my Mawile is in danger. I have no choice but to let it go down, and I lose a pretty important piece I had in mind for Korrina. So I run over to Route 12 on the east side of Shallower City to encounter a Tauros. I don't know how this guy is supposed to help me with Korrina, but every little bit helps. I defeat the last of the required gym trainers. Then I evolve my Sandile into a Krokorok. At this point, my strategy for this gym is to use as many Intimidate users as I can get my hands on. And with my team of Pidgeotto, Gigalith, Frogadier, Tyrant, Tauros, and Krokorok, I decide to take on Korrina. Korrina starts with her Mienfoo, and I start with my Pidgeotto who is holding a Rocky Helmet. Mienfoo will always go for a Fake Out, and with Pidgeotto's Rocky Helmet, I'm hoping it does enough damage so that Pidgeotto can take it out with one Aerial Ace. Aerial Ace is just shy of taking out Mienfoo, who goes for a Power-Up Punch, but thankfully the recoil from the Rocky Helmet knocks it out. I was hoping to not take any extra damage, but that's okay. That was never gonna save me from the disaster that's up ahead. Her second Pokemon is Machoke, and this Machoke has Rock Tomb for speed control and loves to spam it. I get my Pidgeotto out of there and bring in my Tauros, who's still weak to fighting, can at least bring its attack down using Intimidate. Machoke goes for an expected Rock Tomb, and I decide to go to my Frogadier so I can bring back out Tauros for the Intimidate. I also get a lucky miss on Machoke's Rock Tomb, making it so that Frogadier can switch in more often. I switch back and forth into Tauros and Frogadier a little more before ultimately switching out into Tauros and start attacking the Machoke. I genuinely have no idea what I'm doing. At this point, I start spamming Strength because it's the strongest move I have. While Machoke heals, I go for a workup, hoping for more damage. but ultimately it still takes too much damage and Taurus's future is looking pretty bleak. Ultimately Machoke finally goes down and I brace myself for Korrina's ace, her Hawlucha. This segment against Hawlucha is a great example of me not understanding how much damage my Pokemon can take versus how much they can put out. I switch into Krokorok, who's holding an Eviolite, for an Intimidate. However, Hawlucha just negates it by going for a power-up punch. I stay in and go for a Torment to prevent further power-up punches, but Hawlucha is fast and annihilates Krokorok with a Flying Press. This could possibly be a misplay, but honestly at the time I was just full-on panicked. So it's not like I was not paying attention. I switch into Taurus to get another Intimidate off, even though it has Hone Claws and Power Up Punch to recover any damage reduction I could do. I then decide to switch into Pidgeotto, the plan being to set up Feather Dances, but Hawlucha just goes for a Hone Claws in the switch. Hawlucha then goes for a Flying Press that Pidgeotto survives with just 3 HP to set up the Feather Dance. But I just can't tell how useful that really was. I send out Tyrant to see what it can do, and while it can take hits very well, it is just unable to dish out the damage, so it's not gonna work. I send out Tauros for a pointless Intimidate while Hawlucha heals, while on the next turn Hawlucha being faster goes for Hone Claws. Taurus' strength does a lot less damage than I thought, and I'm feeling pretty hopeless. Even though my answer was right there, I just couldn't see it. Then, not knowing what to do, Hawlucha goes for a critical hit Flying Press. I am not sure if that crit mattered. I severely underestimate how much Gigalith can tank, and instead decide to send out Frogadier. Frogadier dances around the inevitable, hoping for a Water Pulse confusion, while Hawlucha continues to raise his attack using Hone Claws and Power-Up Punches. Feeling unnecessarily cornered, I leave Frogadier in, and Frogadier goes down. That's 3 Pokemon down to just this gym leader, 4 down to the gym overall. With my back against the wall, I switch out to Gigalith. Hawlucha goes for a Flying Press, and I finally see how little damage Hawlucha can output to Gigalith. And after 1 smackdown, Hawlucha is taken care of. I should have just sent out Gigalith to begin with. I keep forgetting that Flying Press is registered both as a fighting and a flying type move, so the chart is a little different when it comes to Flying Press, and had I known Gigalith was only neutral to Flying Press, I would have sent it out way earlier. But that was just my lack of game knowledge showing. Don't worry though, the mistakes don't end there. After defeating Korrina, we return to the Tower of Mastery and finally get the Mega Ring. We are then immediately challenged by Korrina in order to prove our worth. This battle is the only time you'll see me use a Mega Evolution, because without it, this battle is basically impossible to win. Either you have to abuse items or you have to use Mega Evolution. Going by strict hardcore Nuzlocke rules, you cannot beat this Lucario. However, after the battle, we get to keep the Lucario as a gift encounter. This Lucario is fixed to be a hasty nature, so no matter how many times you reset, it'll be the same nature every time. North of Route 12 in Azure Bay, I catch a Tentacool. Before we go against our rival outside the Cormeline City Gym, I decide to take a stop at Route 13 just south to catch my next encounter. My encounter for this route is Trapinch, who evolves into the Ground and Dragon type Flygon. Or he would if I didn't accidentally knock it out! Goodness gracious, that's 2 wasted encounters. Before we head to the gym, our rival wants to challenge us to a battle. Her team hasn't changed, so whatever strategy you used before works just fine now. She still starts with her fake out Meowstic, and I start with my Snorlax. After setting up an inconsequential light screen and a weak Psybeam, Meowstic goes down to a few body slams. Then comes her Absol, and a few body slams later, Absol goes down as well. Then comes her ace Quilladin, who still only knows 2 moves, Bite and Needle Arm. I switch into Pidgeotto, who by the way before this battle is the first time I learned it cannot learn acrobatics, and a few aerial aces later, Quilladin is down and we have defeated Serena before the gym. Taking an inspiration from Kanto, the 4th gym leader is a grass type by the name of Ramos. Ramos decides to lead with his Jumpluff, and I decide to lead with my Lucario. The next few turns is Lucario going for Poison Jab as Ramos continues to heal his Jumpluff. He does manage to hit me with a pretty decent acrobatics, but after that it's just a matter of Poison Jabs over and over. In hindsight, a Swords Dance setup would have probably helped me sweep the rest of his team there too. After an insulting critical hit at the very end, Jumpluff goes down, and then Ramos sends out his Gogoat, his ace. Gogoat is lured into using Bulldoze, so I switch into my Pidgeotto. The next turn, I go for a Fly, while Gogoat misses with a takedown. As Fly connects, it's looking like a 2-hit knockout. His takedown also looks like it's gonna take me out in 2 hits, but thankfully I outspeed. Since Fly is not 100% accurate, I wanted to click Aerial Ace, but instead on the touchpad I accidentally Fat Finger and click Feather Dance. Thankfully, Takedown doesn't crit, and I survive, and take out the Go-Goat with an Aerial Ace. I'm just glad I kept my composure when I accidentally clicked Feather Dance. Aerial... No! Why did I do that? Ramos' last Pokemon is a Weepin' Bell. I switched to Ivysaur because the strongest move he can hit her with is a Grass Knot. A couple of Venoshocks later and Weepin' Bell goes down. And with that, we have defeated Ramos and are halfway through the Kalos League. After the gym, I decide to evolve my Tentacool into a Tentacruel, and finally decide to use my Moonstone to evolve my Nidorino into a Nidoking. Before we head to the 5th gym, we have to figure out what Team Flare is up to at the power plant. We defeat this grunt and pick up his power plant pass nearby. Team Flare seems to be siphoning the power off of the power plant, which is what causing the blackout in Lumio City. Our job is to defeat a whole bunch of these grunts. Most of the grunts are rather unremarkable, however there's one grunt. Our Golbat lands a critical hit acrobatics that takes out Pidgeotto. So long, partner. You've been with us since Route 3. And the car crash doesn't end there. As I absentmindedly continue through this gauntlet of grunts, I forget my Lucario is actually also a steel type. He's unable to take out this Scraggy with a power-up punch, and Scraggy in return knocks me out with a high jump kick, putting an end to Lucario's short stay with the team. With the random death of Pidgeotto and now Lucario, it was clear I was playing this game mad tilted. I press on to the end of the power plant where I face an admin. This supposed admin only has one Pokemon, a Houndoom, which my Tentacruel makes very easy work of. After the admin, we take on another Team Flare member by the name of Aliana, who only has a Mightyena. Gen 6 was really worried that you would lose a battle. My unevolved Scraggy is able to make quick work of the Mightyena, and Aliana is shocked to lose to a team of 6. After the power plant is taken care of, the blackout finally ends at Lumio City and the gym is up and running for our 5th gym badge. After a cute little game show, we get ready to face the gym leader, Clement. Clement starts with his electric flying type Emolga, and I start with my little Tyrant. His 2 Pokemons in the back scare me, so Tyrant's job is to make sure to set up some Stealth Rock. Clement will not want to keep his Emolga in, so Tyrant's next job is to hit whoever switches in with a Rock Tomb to reduce speed. Clement uses Volt Switch to bring out Magneton, who threatens with a Mirror Shot. As planned, Tyrant lands a Rock Tomb to reduce Magneton's speed. Thanks to the level cap, I have a newly evolved Pyroar I can switch into to tank the Mirror Shot. All Pyroar can retaliate with is an Ember, which is just shy of knocking it out, while Magneton goes for an Electric Terrain, boosting Electric type moves by 50%. It's also at this time I realized that Terrain moves were not Gen 7, and instead Gen 6. I think it had a lot to do with the Island Legendaries in Gen 7 that made me feel that way. Thanks to the Rock Tomb of our little Tyrant, Magneton is unable to retaliate as Pyroar takes down Magneton with a couple Embers. Finally, out comes his ace, the Heliolisk, who immediately gets some chip damage by Stealth Rock. I switch into Nidoking, as Thunderbolt does absolutely nothing. The next turn, Heliolisk goes for a quick attack, and instead just gets poisoned for his troubles. Nidoking goes underground, then puts a definitive end to the battle with a Dig, taking out Heliolisk. I completely forget Emolga exists, so out comes Emolga. I go into my big boy Gigalith and lay the smackdown on it to take it out. That's the electric gym leader down, and the 5th gym badge is ours. Other than Karina, most of the gym leaders are a pretty big walk in the park because they only carry 3 Pokemon. The challenging battles are all the other NPCs that we have to face. After the battle, we meet up with Lysander at his cafe, where he talks about cleaning the filth, to which Professor Sycamore just goes, what can you do? Right outside on Route 14, Serena wants us to battle us again. As always, she starts with her Meowstic. I decide to start with my Tyrant, hoping to take it out with a single crunch. After a fake out, Meowstic blasts me with a Psychic, which does more damage than I thought it would, and unfortunately Crunch does not get the job done. So I switch out to Gigalith. Gigalith takes decent damage from Psychic, then Meowstic sets up a light screen, and then goes down to a smackdown. Serena brings out her ace Chestnut in return, hoping to get a knockout with her Sleep Bomb. Due to light screen, I can't switch out to Venusaur and instead switch into Nidoking. Despite not resisting, Nidoking is able to take the Seed Bomb pretty well, and retaliates back with a Poison Jab. After taking a bite which doesn't flinch, Nidoking is able to take out Chestnut with another Poison Jab. Our final Pokemon is still the Absol. I sent back my Gigalith because it should tank Absol's hits. After resisting most of Absol's hits, Gigalith retaliates with a Rock Slide, and then the next turn puts it away using a Smackdown. Better luck next time, bucko! My encounter for Route 14 is a Skorupi, another poison type to my team. This Skorupi evolves into a darkened poison type Drapion and has battle armor, meaning it can't be crit. With my gang of poison types, I arrive at Laver City, ready to take on the fairy type gym. As I battle through the fairy type gym trainers, Skorupi evolves into Drapion. After zooming through some portals, we arrive at Valerie, the fairy type gym leader. She starts with a Mawile, and I start with my Drapion. What's hilarious is that this Mawile does not know any fairy type moves. It knows Feint Attack, Crunch, and Iron Defense. So it's the perfect Pokemon for my Drapion to set up some Toxic Spikes and go for a bunch of Hone Claws. My Drapion's also holding the Rocky Helmet, so whatever damage Mawile is doing to me with Crunch and Feint Attack, it's doing about the same to itself. Near the end, I hit it with a resisted Night Slash on purpose, hoping it heals up to waste its potions. But it knocks itself out because of the Rocky Helmet. Next comes her Mr. Mime, who gets badly poisoned because of my Toxic Spikes, and goes down to a single Poison Fang. Usually, this Mr. Mime likes to set up screens. Finally comes Sylveon, her ace. Once again, immediately poisoned by the Toxic Spikes. And once again, immediately goes down to a single Poison Fang. Mawile was the real MVP of this battle. I know Corina gave me a hard time, but I genuinely don't know why they keep giving the Kalos gym leaders only 3 Pokemon. Some of them don't even have 4 moves. With the fairy type gym out of the way, I bring Scraggy onto the team and evolve it into Scrafty. For my Laver City encounter, I fish out a Poliwag. By the way, in the background, I'm doing Pokemon Ami with my Eevee as much as I can because I needed to have 2 affection so that when it learns a fairy type move, it can evolve into Sylveon. At level 29, Eevee learns Charm, then after a level up, evolves into Sylveon. Just like at the power plant earlier, Team Flare are causing a commotion at the Pokeball factory located in Laver City. Our neighbor and rival Serena is here to help us take on Team Flare admins Celosia and Brioni. They have 1 Pokemon each, Liepard and Manectric. I send out my Sylveon, and Serena sends out her Meowstic. A Moonblast makes quick work of Liepard, and then we double up on the Manectric with a Psychic and then a Moonblast to put it away. Wait, Team Flare is trying to get stuff done with these kind of teams? For our troubles, we get a Master Ball and a big Nugget. I surf on Route 15 to get myself a Lombre, the water and grass type. When it's finally daytime, my Tyrant evolves into a Tyrantrum, and I use my Water Stone from all the way back in Route 8 to evolve Lombre to Ludicolo. In the Lost Hotel located inside Route 15, I encounter a Pawniard. As I get to Dendemil Town, Dexio and Professor Sycamore tell us about Xerneas, the Pokemon who gives life. North of Dendemil Town, in the Frost Cavern, I encounter a Piloswine. I run into Team Flare's Mabel harassing an Abomasnow for something. She gets upset at me interrupting her and challenges us to a battle with 1 lonely Houndoom. I guess when you're after a Abomasnow, that's all you need? But damn. Yeah, I don't even know how to provide any analysis here. Anyway, after helping out the Abomasnow, we can traverse Route 17 on the back of a Mamoswine. My encounter here is a Delibird, and I'll be surprised if this Delibird is even half as useful as the male Combi we used to sacrifice earlier in the game. Well, I tried. We arrived to Anastar City, and before we can approach the 7th gym, Serena wants to have a rematch. She finally added a 4th Pokemon to her team this time. As always, she starts with her Meowstic, and I start with my Gigalith. Meowstic goes for the Fake Out, and in the next turn hits hard with a Psychic. I decide to play it safe and go for 2 Smackdowns instead of Rock Slides. The next turn, Meowstic goes for a Disarming Voice instead of a Psychic for some reason, and Smackdown is just shy of a knockout. Maybe I should have just risked a Rock Slide. I think about switching to Scrafty, predicting another Psychic, but I decide to stay in just in case it goes for a quad effective Disarming Voice. However, it goes for neither and goes for a Shadow Ball, and goes down to a Smackdown after. Our new addition is her Vaporeon, and I go into Scrafty to take advantage of its lower physical defense. Vaporeon goes for an Aurora Beam, and since he's faster, gets to go for another Aurora Beam. That crits. Brick Break does a lot less damage than I thought it would. Vaporeon then goes for a Quick Attack, which crits again! And I retaliate with a Crunch. I switch out to Tentacruel, who can evolve Vaporeon, but unfortunately also can't really deal a lot of damage back. Instead, I take this time to set up 2 layers of Toxic Spikes, and ultimately take down the Vaporeon with some Acid Sprays. she sends out her ace Chestnut, who still only knows 2 moves. Unfortunately, Tentacruel can't stay in because I don't think he can tank a Seed Bomb anymore, so I switch into Nidoking. Chestnut instead ends up going for a Brick Break. I just don't know what Gen 6 AI does sometimes. And in the next turn, Nidoking hits hard with a Poison Jab. Luck is on my side as Nidoking is able to survive a Seed Bomb and is able to take out the Chestnut with one last Poison Jab. Our last Pokemon is Absol, and I can't just switch into Sylveon because I have to be cautious of the level cap. So I switch into Pyroar, and Absol hits me with a really strong Night Slash. Flamethrower doesn't do as much damage as I hope, and Absol wastes a turn with a Swords Dance instead. So the next turn I'm able to defeat Serena with one last Flamethrower. And you thought you were deserving of a Mega Ring, huh? Then it's time to challenge Olympia of the Anastar City Gym for our 7th gym badge. Our plan for this gym is very simple. Crunch till we can't anymore. Olympia starts with her Sigilyph, and I start with my Tyrantrum. Because Tyrantrum's in front of it, Sigilyph sets up a Reflect. Anyway, Tyrantrum goes for a Crunch. Sigilyph retaliates with a decent Psychic. Anyway, Tyrantrum goes for a Crunch. Then comes her Slowking. Anyway, Tyrantrum goes for a Crunch. Slowking tries to put an end to my charade by going for a Yawn. Anyway, Tyrantrum goes for a Crunch. I decide to stay in and take a Psychic that could have taken me out if it were a crit. As the Reflect approaches its end, I switch into Drapion. Now that Reflect is over, a Night Slash is all it takes to bring down Slowking. Then comes her ace Meowstic, a Pokemon we're so familiar with. As is the law for all Meowstic, it starts with a Fake Out, then goes for a Shadow Ball which does very little damage. Drapion uses Night Slash, which brings the Meowstic down to healing range. And then just a couple more Night Slashes, and we have defeated Olympia. I'm not exactly sure, but if I had a Chesto Berry or a Lumberry, I don't even know if I had to switch out Tyrantrum. Our victory celebration is short-lived because after the battle, Lysander is like, "Alright, I'm gonna kill everybody." Before we handle Lysander, I stop by Shalor City to get my next encounter, which is a Remoraid. We head back to Lumio City close to the gym and get inside Lysander Cafe where his secret base is hidden. Inside waiting for us is Lysander, and this begins the first of the 3 battles against Lysander. I don't really have a sound strategy for this battle other than just hoping to avoid crits and stumbling to the finish. Lysander starts with his fighting type Mienfoo, while I send out my Sylveon. Mienfoo wastes a turn going for Sword Stance, so I quickly put it away with a Moonblast. This immediately brings out his ace Gyarados, and I honestly don't know what to do. I switched to Scrafty because he's my most physically bulky Pokemon. He tanks an Iron Head pretty well, but an Aqua Tail brings it down pretty low. Then Scrafty retaliates with a weak Crunch. I swap into Ludicolo because he will tank the Aqua Tail, and also then bring out Outrage. Ludicolo just barely survives an Outrage, and retaliates with a decent Grass Knot, setting up Gyarados to be knocked out by Sylveon. I bring in Sylveon on the Outrage. As Outrage fails, Gyarados goes into Confusion. Gyarados hitting himself in Confusion is the only chance I have of Sylveon surviving. I get lucky and Sylveon is able to take out Gyarados with a Moon's Blast. God, this is just the first of 3 battles. Then comes his Murkrow. Steel Wing does a little bit of damage, and Sylveon is able to take it out with a Moonblast. Then comes his last Pokemon, Pyroar. I switch into Tentacruel as he tanks a Fire Blast. Pyroar is faster, so he's able to attack with a Hyper Voice. Tentacruel hits Pyroar with a Surf that is just not enough to knock it out, so I have to risk another crit. A second Hyper Voice comes out, and Tentacruel barely lives, and goes for the Surf, and finally knocks out Pyroar. I don't have much better strategies for the next 2 battles with Lysander, but that's not a problem for now. After battling Lysander, we face Mabel again to get the elevator key to go to the bottom levels of the Lysander Cafe. Mabel this time has double the Pokemon she had the first time, as in she has 2 Pokemon. She starts off with her Houndoom, and I start off with my Tentacruel. Houndoom survives the Surf. Foul Play hits hard, but less than half after the recovery, and then goes down to another Surf. Then comes her Weavile. Thinking I can tank a Night Slash, I stay in, and it almost knocks me out, and a Surf does way less damage than I thought. I switch into Sylveon, who is able to safely tank a hit and take care of Weavile with a Moonblast. Oh yeah, and Lysander captured this LA resident too. Despite beating Lysander and his admins, they decide to launch the ultimate weapon anyway. So then, for some reason, it is up to me, a man who doesn't even have all the gym badges, to stop them. We head back to Geocinch Town, where Serena catches up to us and says she's coming with. At the Team Flare headquarters, we approach Lysander with Serena and prepare for our second battle. This time around, all of his Pokemons have fully evolved. However, our strategy and setup is mostly the same as the first time. He starts off with his Mienshao, and I start off with my Sylveon. Mienshao opts in for a resisted high jump kick, even though it knows acrobatics, and Sylveon takes it out with a Moonblast. Just as before, this brings out his ace Gyarados, who sees the kill with Iron Head. I switch to Scrafty to tank the Iron Head. The next turn, Gyarados hits me with a strong Aqua Tail, while I hit back with a Crunch. Scrafty is also holding a Rocky Helmet to provide as much chip damage as possible. Then I switch out to my Ludicolo. Aqua Tail does barely any damage, especially after leftover recovery. I use the Protect for even more leftover recovery, and the next turn Gyarados hits hard with an Outrage. Ludicolo is able to survive and take out the Gyarados with a Grass Knot. Didn't have to dance around the confusion like last time. Then comes his Honchkrow. After stalling a turn with Protect for leftovers, I switch into Drapion. Drapion is able to tank all of Honchkrow's moves and takes it out with a couple of Ice Fangs thanks to a move tutor. Then comes his final Pokemon, the Pyroar. I switch into my Tentacruel, who is able to tank almost anything Pyroar can do, and take it out with a couple of Surfs. And with that, we have overcome Lysander a second time. In my opinion, this is the hardest out of the 3 battles we have to go against him. What follows is a pretty mundane series of battles against Team Flare grunts and admins. They all have pretty similar battles, and there's not much complexity or challenge. It's a great way to level up your Pokemon, but also be aware of level caps. So I'm just gonna fly through these. Anyway, with the help of Shauna and the device Clement made for us, we're able to go through the door, fight some grunts, and approach the Pokemon that gives life. Then we shove a Master Ball at it and shove it in a box. Lysander's real mad about what I just did, and says he's gonna battle us using a Mega Stone. This brings us to the final battle against Lysander, and as I hinted earlier, I find this battle just a little easier than his second. Mienshao comes first on his side of the field, and Sylveon comes out first for me. Sylveon eats the incoming acrobatics pretty well, and is able to take out Mienshao with a Moonblast. The AI always sends their Mega Evolving Pokemon last, so instead of Gyarados, this time Honchkrow comes out second. I risk a crit staying in, but Sylveon is able to survive, and take out the Honchkrow with a Moonblast as well. Then comes his Pyroar, and I send out my Tentacruel, who can pretty much wall anything Pyroar can do. Tentacruel goes for a Surf, which thankfully also critically hits, and is able to take out the Pyroar in one hit. Finally comes his ace, Gyarados, holding a Gyarados. I bring in my Scrafty. Gyarados Mega Evolves into Mecha Gyarados, becoming a Water and Dark type. We tank an Earthquake, then proceed to tank an Aqua Tail, and then hit it back with a super effective Brick Break. Then I switch out to my Ludicolo, who after a leftovers recovery barely takes any damage from the Aqua Tail. I go for a Protect to recover as much HP as I can, so I can survive an Outrage. I barely survive an Outrage thanks to the leftover recovery, and Ludicolo goes for a Grass Knot to put the Gyarados to rest. It may not have seemed like it because I have 3 Pokemon that were almost dead, but this final Lysander battle felt much more controlled than the first 2. To celebrate defeating Team Flare, I head back to the Parfum Palace, where I fish up a very lucky Adamant Magikarp, who I quickly evolve into Gyarados. On Route 18, on the way to Corway Town, I encountered Durant. In Terminus Cave, found on Route 18, I get ambushed for my encounter in Ariados. When we get to Corway Town, we're approached by Professor Sycamore. He apologizes for not knowing Lysander's intentions, even though I think he made it pretty obvious, and then challenges us to a battle. Professor Sycamore comes to battle having 3 Cantonian starters, all of them evolved to their final form. Professor Sycamore starts off with a Venusaur, and I start off with my Pyroar. A couple of flamethrowers make easy work of Venusaur, as Pyroar takes little damage from a resisted Petal Blizzard. His Blastoise comes next, so I switch into Ludicolo. A wasted Iron Defense and a resisted Aqua Tail later, Blastoise goes down to 2 Grass Knots. Then finally comes Charizard, who is just completely walled by Gigalith. After taking a couple of resisted hits, Gigalith puts away Charizard with a single smackdown. And that's the battle against Professor Sycamore. Yeah, ain't no way y'all were about to defeat Lysander. After the battle, I encounter Floatzel as my Koroway town encounter. On Route 19, I encounter a Sliggoo. However, it's an adamant nature, which is less than ideal. Depending on the time, it's almost always raining on Route 14, so I use this chance to evolve my Sliggoo into Goodra. Then comes the dreaded rival bridge, something I've been dreading for a while. You have to battle Shauna, Tierno, and Trevor in a row, the first 2 battles back to back without healing. Shauna starts with her Delcatty, and I start with my Ludicolo. After scoping out a turn using Protect, I put away Delcatty with a couple of Surfs as it goes for a weak play rough. Then comes out her illegal level 49 Goodra, who threatens with a Sludge Wave. I switch into Gigalith, tank a Sludge Wave, then switch into Gyarados after baiting an Earthquake. I set up a turn of Dragon Dance as Goodra hits me with a pretty weak Dragon Pulse. Then I hit back with a Never Melt Ice boosted Ice Fang, which misses, which means I have to take another Dragon Pulse and ultimately can't keep Gyarados around for the whole sweep. For now, Gyarados is able to put Goodra away with another Ice Fang. Shauna's last Pokemon is a Delphox. I switch into Scrafty on the incoming Psychic. Delphox then goes for a Mystical Fire, which unfortunately crits. A Crunch is barely shy of knocking out Delphox, as Delphox goes for a second Mystical Fire that thankfully does not crit. Then a second Crunch is able to put away the Delphox. I'm honestly not sure if I should have just stayed with Gyarados after the Dragon Dance boost, but I didn't want to risk getting outsped. Then comes Tierno. He leads with his Talonflame, who doesn't know any fire type moves, and I'm still stuck with Ludicolo in the front. I switch into Gigalith, who Talonflame is pretty helpless against, and Gigalith takes it out with 1 smackdown. Then comes Tierno's Roserade, whose only move is Petal Dance. I switch into my Pyroar, who takes it out with a single Flamethrower. Then comes his ace Crawdaunt, and I bring out Ludicolo. After taking a Crab Hammer, a Grass Knot is barely not enough to take out the Crawdaunt. Crawdaunt retaliates with a vicious Night Slash that crits and leaves me with 8 HP. Dang, maybe I should have just switched into Durant. Ludicolo then takes out the Crawdaunt with 1 last Grass Knot. That's 2 out of 3 rival battles done. We get some reprieve as Trevor heals us before challenging us to a battle. Trevor starts the battle by sending out his Raichu, and I'm still on Ludicolo. I switch to Gigalith as Thunderbolt does decent damage. A second Thunderbolt comes out and brings me down to 50 HP, as a Rock Slide is just shy of knocking it out. I then switch into Scrafty and take a Thunderbolt, and then a second Thunderbolt that crits. However, a Brick Break is able to put away the Raichu. That brings out his ace Florges. I switch into Durant, who takes a big chunk of damage even from a resisted Moonblast. Durant, while holding a metal coat, takes out Florges with an Iron Head. Finally comes his speedy Aerodactyl, and I switch into Ludicolo. Aerodactyl misses with a Supersonic. I go for a Protect, while Aerodactyl goes for another Supersonic. Finally, Aerodactyl goes for yet another Supersonic that thankfully misses, and Ludicolo takes it out with a Surf. No idea what the AI was going for there. And with that, we have defeated our other 3 rivals. Afterwards, we arrive to Snowbell City and rush straight into Route 20 where we encounter a Gothorita. We arrive deep into the Pokemon Village where we let Wulfric know that we're here to challenge him for the 8th gym badge. At the Pokemon Village, I encounter a Jigglypuff. As I go back and battle all the optional trainers on Route 20, Pawniard evolves into Bisharp. Then we confront Wulfric at the gym and challenge him for our final gym badge. Wulfric starts off with the Abomasnow, who also sets up Hail. And I start off with my Pyroar. Pyroar makes quick work of Abomasnow with a quad effective Flamethrower. Then comes his Ice Giant Avalugg. Another Flamethrower by Pyroar quickly melts him away. Then comes his Sentient Block of Ice, Cryogonal. And I send out my Bisharp. Cryogonal lands a Confuse Ray, but I came prepared with a Hell Person Berry. The next turn, Cryogonal outspeeds and hits me with a pretty weak Ice Beam. And Bisharp hits back with a critical hit Iron Head, putting away Cryogonal and defeating Wulfric for the 8th and final gym badge. Despite some rough stumblings here and there, we're actually making it to the Pokemon League. As I prepare for the victory road, Gothorita evolves into Gothitail. For my second to last encounter before the Elite Four, on Route 21, I run into Spinda. Just look at this goofy little guy, man. As I arrive at the gates of the victory road, it catches me off guard that we have to battle the gatekeeper. Thankfully, my Pokemons are decently healed up and the battle goes without much issues. However, at this moment I realize that I'm pretty nervous about what is ahead. As I sort of described in my Omega Ruby video, I always get pretty nervous near the end because losing here would mean restarting all the way back. Oh well, no way out but through. My final encounter for the game at the Victory Road is a Lickitung. Then near the end, Serena catches up to us, who challenges to a battle one last time before the Pokemon League. As always, Serena starts with her Meowstic, and I start with Durant. Meowstic goes for the obvious fake out. Then in the next turn, I go for X-Scissor, but Meowstic lives by just a pinch. She deals decent damage with Shadow Ball, but most importantly also gets a special defense drop. Then in the next turn, another X-Scissor puts away the Meowstic. Then comes out her Vaporeon, and I send out my Scrafty. On coming in, he takes a Muddy Water. That also lowers his accuracy. Vaporeon then goes for a second Muddy Water, and while holding a Wide Lens, I go for a High Jump Kick, which does less damage than I had hoped. I switch into Gyarados to save my Scrafty, as Vaporeon goes for another Muddy Water. It crits, but it still does little damage, and Gyarados takes out Vaporeon with an Earthquake. Then comes her Altaria. Altaria outspeeds and hits with a Dragon Pulse, as Gyarados puts away Altaria with a single Ice Fang. Then comes her ace, Chestnut. I stay in and go for an Ice Fang, which does surprisingly less than half, as Chestnut fires back with a huge Seed Bomb that crits and puts an end to Gyarados. What an abrupt end to an adamant Gyarados, right at the steps of the Pokemon League. Durant comes to avenge his fallen teammate and goes for an Aerial Ace, which is just a little shy from getting the job done. As Chestnut goes for a Brick Break, I'm just hoping it doesn't crit. Durant survives and takes out Chestnut with one last Aerial Ace. Then comes our penultimate Pokemon, Absol, and I bring out Sylveon. After taking a Night Slash and a wasted Sword Stance, Absol goes down to a Moonblast. And with that, we have defeated Serena for a final time before the Elite Four. I just wish I hadn't gotten so overconfident about Gyarados' survivability in that situation. At last, we're at the doorsteps of the Elite Four. When I was getting destroyed by Korrina, I didn't actually think I'd make it this far, because I thought I had set myself up to fail. I thought my lack of game knowledge really shined in this playthrough, as I was having issues with the most random of trainers. But somehow, someway, I've made it this far. With my final team of Nidoking, Ludicolo, Sylveon, Tyrantrum, Gothitail, and Pyroar, we proceed forward. I decide to start with Drasna and her Dragon types. I believe she'll be the hardest for my team, so I want to take care of her early. Elite Four, here we go. Drasna starts off with her Dragalge, and I send out Nidoking. Dragalge threatens with a Surf, but since it is really slow, Nidoking goes first and takes Dragalge out with a single Earthquake, an emphatic statement to start the Pokemon League. Drasna wastes no time and immediately brings out her ace, Noivern. Hoping for a Dragon Pulse, I switch into Sylveon, but unfortunately, Noivern goes for a Super Fang, which always does 50% of your HP. As Noivern goes for an Air Slash, I can survive a crit, but I brace for a flinch, and while it's a crit, it doesn't flinch, and Sylveon takes out the Noivern with a Moonblast. Then comes Altaria. Gothitail makes her debut, as Altaria goes for a pretty weak Moonblast. On top of that, I get lucky. The special attack falls, but Gothitail's competitive makes it so that I actually end up +1 special attack. Altaria goes for a meaningless Cotton Guard, as Gothitail hits hard with a Psychic. In the next turn, Gothitail tanks a Dragon Pulse, and puts Altaria to rest with one last Psychic. Then comes her last Pokemon, Druddigon. I forget Druddigon carries Retaliate and hit it with a Psychic, as Druddigon kicks me out of here with a Dragon Tail, conveniently bringing out my Tyrantrum instead. Tyrantrum is able to take down Druddigon with a Dragon Claw, and with that we have beaten our first Elite Four member. Then we get ready to face Wikstrom, the Steel type specialist of the Elite Four. Wikstrom starts off with a sentient pair of keys, Klefki, and I start off with Pyroar. I attempt an early knockout with a flamethrower that leaves Klefki with barely any health, and that begins the loop of Wikstrom constantly healing his Klefki while I keep going for flamethrowers. At the tail end, Klefki unfortunately gets to lay some spikes, and I take it out with some flamethrower. Then comes out his Rock and Steel Probopass. I switch into Ludicolo, wanting to avoid Earth Power or Power Gem. After taking some spikes damage, Probopass hits me with a Rock Gem for some decent damage. I go for Protect the next turn just to get some health back with Leftovers Recovery. The turn after, I go for Surf that brings it down to just below half health. As I take another Power Gem for my efforts. I stall another turn to get more Leftover Recovery. Then put away the Probopass with one last Surf, which ends up being a critical hit. Could have used that earlier. Then comes the Bug and Steel Scizor. I go for one more Protect and get some health back with Leftovers, and then immediately switch back into Pyroar. In addition to the spikes damage, X Scissors does a surprising amount of damage to my Pyroar, but in the next turn is able to easily put away the Scizor with one 4 times effective Flamethrower. Then comes his final Pokemon, his ace, Aegislash, the Steel and Ghost type. I bring in my Nidoking, as Aegislash goes for just a King's Shield. Nidoking goes for an Earthquake that is not strong enough to put it away, as Aegislash changes forms and hits hard with an Iron Head that does not flinch. Then in the following turn, Nidoking is able to go for one last strong Earthquake and put away the Aegislash, and we have defeated Wikstrom. Those were the 2 hardest Elite Four members I just defeated. The other 2 are not easy by any means, but Wikstrom and Drosna were the ones I was scared of the most. Then comes Sabold, the water type specialist of the Elite Four and the famous chef of Restaurant Layoff of Lumio City. Sabold starts with his Clawitzer, and I start with my Ludicolo. I go for an Energy Ball, which leaves Clawitzer with just a little bit of health, as it hits back with Dragon Pulse. Then begins the loop of Sabold healing his Clawitzer as I keep going for energy balls. As I go for my 4th energy ball, I get lucky and get a crit, and Clawitzer goes down. This brings out his ace Barbaracle. I go for a Protect to get some HP back. Then in the next turn, Ludicolo blasts off a quad effective energy ball, take out the Barbaracle. Then comes his Starmie. As I go for Protect to recover more HP, I realize I've made a pretty big mistake, as Starmie sets up a light screen, reducing the damage of all special moves by half. Ludicolo takes a Psychic, as energy ball just less than half thanks to the light screen. I go for another round of Protect, and this time it's not just for the Leftovers recovery, but also to waste a turn of light screen. Starmie goes for another Psychic, and Ludicolo hits a high roll energy ball that is able to take out the Starmie. Then comes out his scary Gyarados. I switch into Gothitelle ASAP. Usually I would Protect, but Dragon Dances are scary. I was right to switch as Gyarados immediately goes for a Dragon Dance. The light screen wears off, and I realize my mistake that I forgot to teach Thunderbolt. So I go ahead and use Psychic as it sets up another Dragon Dance. I am getting pretty scared at this point. Legitimately, at the time of recording, my hands were getting sweaty. Mom spaghetti. Psychic hits, and it does a third of his health as it sets up a 3rd Dragon Dance. Good lord, please. Not this way, I beg. A 2nd Psychic comes out as I pray for a crit. And it's not enough. Gyarados goes for a Waterfall. And Gothitelle survives with 2 HP, baby! Another Psychic comes out. And down goes the terrifying Gyarados. And we have defeated Sabold, the 3rd member of the Elite Four. Goodness gracious. Next up is Malva, Fire-type Savant of the Elite Four. Malva starts with her Pyroar as I start with my Tyrantrum. Pyroar begins with a Noble Roar that lowers my attack and special attack, as Rock Slide deals just enough damage to keep Pyroar away from healing range. Tyrantrum goes for a Hyper Voice that does little damage, and retaliates with an Earthquake to put away the Pyroar. This brings out her Torkoal as I switch into Ludicolo. After a wasted turn on Curse, Ludicolo puts away the Torkoal using a single Surf. This brings out her ace Talonflame, and I switch back into my Tyrantrum. Tyrantrum walls everything Talonflame has to offer, as Brave Bird does almost as much damage in Recoil and Rocky Helmet as it does to me. As Talonflame goes for another desperate Brave Bird, Tyrantrum puts away Talonflame with a Rock Slide. Then comes her actual strongest Pokemon in my opinion, Chandelier. I switch into Sylveon, meaning to switch into Pyroar, as Chandelier hits me with a Shadow Ball. Thankfully, Sylveon attacks it pretty well, and I decide to stay in with a Protect just to see what it wants to do next. Unfortunately, Chandelier goes for a Confide that goes through the Protect to lower my special attack. The next turn I do a Psyshock just to get some chip damage, but before I can, Chandelier hits me with a Confuse Ray. Thankfully, Sylveon is able to hit through the confusion. I switch in Ludicolo, as Chandelier goes for another Confide, then on the next turn, goes for another Confuse Ray. Ludicolo is unable to fight through the confusion, as Chandelier goes for another Confide. Ludicolo finally goes for a Surf, but after 2 Confides, it's just not enough anymore. Chandelier then hits Ludicolo with a Flamethrower, as I beg for Ludicolo to fight through the confusion, but is unfortunately not able to. I switch into Nidoking to see if he's going to be able to do anything, and that answer is a no. I finally come to realize the ace up my sleeve, and switch out Pyroar. Pyroar tanks a Flamethrower like it's nothing, and because she's faster, he's able to retaliate back with a Flamethrower of her own, taking out Chandelier, defeating Malva, and finishing the Elite Four. I genuinely cannot believe, after 10 deaths and 3 missed encounters, we're actually headed to the champion. Man, and this was the same playthrough that Corina wiped the floor with me. Genuinely didn't think I would make it this far. Without further ado, let's begin the last battle against the Pokemon champion Diantha. Diantha starts with Hawlucha, and this time I know how Flying Press works. I bring out my Tyrantrum. Hawlucha goes for a Flying Press, as she does just as much damage to herself as she does to me, thanks to the Rocky Helmet. Tyrantrum goes for a Rock Slide that keeps Hawlucha just out of healing range. A second Flying Press comes out, as Tyrantrum puts away Hawlucha using a Dragon Claw. Then comes her Goodra, and I go into my Sylveon. After whiffing a Dragon Pulse, Goodra goes for a Fire Blast that does little damage, but unfortunately leaves Sylveon with a burn. Sylveon goes for a Moon Blast that is not enough to take Goodra out, and in the next turn Diantha heals her Goodra all the way back up. Sylveon then goes for a second Moon Blast that crits and puts away Goodra in one hit. As Diantha's own Tyrantrum comes out, Sylveon's negative speed nature means it's a speed tie on who'll go next. I use Protect just to see what moves it decides to go for, as it seems to want to go for Head Smash. I have no choice but to take a gamble as I click on Moonblast. But Sylveon outspeeds, goes for a Moonblast, and takes out Tyrantrum. What absolute grit. As Aurorus comes out, many of you can already tell that I have no choice but to keep Sylveon in, as burn damage chips away at most of her health. Sylveon goes for a Moonblast that does decent damage and also lowers her special attack, as Aurora sets up a light screen. I genuinely don't want to click this button. I thought all 6 of us could make it to the end. Sylveon goes down valiantly as he blasts off another Moonblast that gets another special offense drop. Theo, my dude, couldn't have done it without you. Nidoking comes out and takes out Aurorus with an Earthquake, avenging his fallen brother. Then comes her Grass and Ghost type Gourgeist. Unsure on what to do, I stay in and go for a Poison Jab for some chip damage, as it goes for a Phantom Force. Phantom Force hits and it does a decent bit of damage, as the light screen set up by Aurorus finally wears off. The next turn I go for Shadow Claw, as Gourgeist goes for a Trick or Treat, which adds a Ghost type to my Nidoking. Diantha heals up her Gourgeist, as another Shadow Claw does way more damage thanks to the added Ghost typing from Trick or Treat. The next turn, one last Shadow Claw finally puts away the Gourgeist, leaving Diantha to her final Pokemon. Diantha's last Pokemon is her Gardevoir. With her back against the wall, Diantha Mega Evolves her Gardevoir, and with no choice but to move forward, I go for a Poison Jab. Nidoking outspeeds and take care of Gardevoir with a single Poison Jab, getting us the victory and overcoming the Pokemon X and Y hardcore Nuzlocke. I genuinely can't believe I got here. I've said it a few times before, but including Sylveon, that's 11 deaths, 2 failed encounters. Corina almost ended my run then and there, and in that same attempt I make it this far? I thought it would be a 2 attempt run for sure. Even within the Elite Four, I really think about the moments such as Gothitelle surviving on 2 HP against Cybo's Gyarados, or Nidoking going first against Diantha's Gardevoir. What if they hadn't? I don't know if I would have had an out. I'm sure a lot of you looked at my battle against Corina and you guys understood Flying Press better and were probably screaming at me to change into my Gigalith while I just stayed with my other Pokemon. Or even against Malva and her Chandelier earlier in the Elite Four, I could have probably switched into my Pyroar and taken out the Chandelier instead of letting it get dicey with all the Confides and Confuse Rays. In Omega Ruby, I knew I could do it. In X and Y, I just assumed I could. So is X and Y as easy as people say it is? Well, considering I lost about 11 Pokemon and 2 encounters, and I didn't really have the depth of the game as I did for Omega Ruby, and I almost lost the entire run in the 3rd gym and still came back in the same run, I would like to say it's on the easier side. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.